So carrying on year six where we were with our earlier part of this video, um, artillery then is a piece of language which is this large caliber, so these guns that could inflict a lot of harm. The caliber is how wide or the diameter of the barrel, so the element of the gun where the bit comes out of. That's the barrel, and how wide it is. The diameter of that is called the caliber. Okay, because they because the Battle of the Somme and other battles within the World War I took so long to resolve because not much progress was made. People got these entrenched fortifications in their trenches and didn't move, didn't lose space quickly. Armies, both German and British, and both the other country and the other countries on those sides, needed to find the large caliber weapons which enabled them to shoot from a long way away to try and inflict harm on their opponent. Okay, and we've got these machine guns, and in the bottom left, those large caliber weapons. Some of them, though, they needed up to 12 people to carry, and then the actual shells, which are like the little bombs, which like bullets, which went from them, they were up to 900 pounds. So if you imagine I'm approximately 200 pounds in weight, that's like four and a half. Sorry, me. They'd need to put them in to then explode them. Okay, so really heavy pieces of weaponry that needed to be then loaded with really heavy devices to be shot at the opposition, the opponent. Sorry. It was the first war which was ever using gas, so it was chlorine and mustard gas. Now, those ingredients sound relatively harmless. In a swimming pool, we have chlorine and we eat mustard. However, the way that they were used was designed to inflict harm and pain on people. Um, the French soldiers didn't know what was happening to them. They just thought it was smoke that was being used as a way of making them distracted rather than that they were being hurt. Okay, they smelt this smell of like pepper and pineapple, and they only realised they were what's called gas, where they were being hurt by it, when they suddenly had chest pains and they had this burning sensation in their throats. And some of them died because of suffocation because they couldn't breathe properly, and it was incredibly painful. What they decided, or what they discovered through accident, I imagine, was that by using urine, so by weeing on cotton, they could then put that over their mouth. And although that sounds disgusting, it stopped the gas getting into them and protected them. Because they discovered that, they then discovered they could try and develop non-wee based, non-urine based gas masks. Mustard gas was the most painful, the most powerful weapon. Um, you couldn't smell it, so you weren't aware it was being used as a weapon. And it took up to 12 hours before it hurt you. So you throw it in, somebody would throw it in, and people wouldn't become sick until up to half a day later. And it didn't need to have lots in it. So it went in these weapons that were shot across, and it didn't need to have lots in it. So they could be relatively small weapons. And for many weeks afterwards, it stayed able to hurt people. As well as killing people, it also caused people to go blind, their skin to change, blister, and then they'd need to be sick. They'd be sick. Inside and outside would bleed, and it could hurt their lungs. It could take up to a month, 5 weeks to die. It took a long time of a long, painful death. I've just had tanks also. The first one was called Little Willie. It had this Daimler engine, a Caterpillar track, and needed 3 people in it. It could go 3 miles an hour, so slower than walking really, and couldn't really go across trenches and wasn't very good because it kept breaking down. However, people realised that it affected not just physically how the German soldiers were perceiving the British, but it also started to make them feel bad, feel worried that they were coming. And therefore, because the Germans were getting low morale and the British were feeling confident they were starting to feel defended in no man's land, they persevered with the development of tanks. They persevered. Sorry, there's a picture of tanks behind my head there. As they persevered with the tanks, and you can see that one's just on the top screen. Um, they developed them, and I say perversely, just how things happen. It wasn't until right at the end of the war that they developed something called the Fiat Tipo, and it could go up to 10 miles an hour, so about 2.5 times as quick as people normally when they were walking. And within it, it was the first one that had a revolving turret, so people could be within the tank, but they could turn around all 360 degrees to look everywhere whilst they were in it. But it could have 10 men in it, and it could go up to 4 miles an hour. So it could go about the speed of when we walk. That was a bit quicker than the other one, but 10 men suddenly had a bit of protection and they could see around them. So it had more protection. And we can see what that might look like down on the bottom of the page with that curved element at the top of the picture is that turret where people could look out from, and that's where they could launch attacks and also identify if they were under attack. As was experienced in private peaceful, the advent of planes was also occurring at the time of the First World War. So there was the war in the air for the first time. The Zeppelin or blimp was an airship which was used by Germans. Okay, and it weighed a lot. And it was had full of gas, so full of hydrogen, which enabled it to fly. And then they had these engines, and they could travel nearly twice as fast as cars could, up about 3 miles in the sky. And they had guns and machine guns. And what they did is they raided places where and they came away. Eventually, they gave up having them because what they discovered is these massive balls of gas, which they basically were very easy targets and very seeable or very viewable by the opponents, so the British could see them before they could shoot them down. But initially, they were used to drop lots of bombs and shoot at people from some distance. As well as those Zeppelin blimps, they also started to have planes. Okay, these were used as fighter planes, so they'd fight against other planes. They could go to look at things, so reconnaissance, and they were known. And they could also drop bombs. So they have three real functions: finding stuff out, which is reconnaissance, dropping bombs, and fighting in these dogfights. And this is the kind of plane they would have. Obviously, they look a lot more vulnerable to attack than the kind of planes we're used to now, but you could still see the impact of them. And so this was then the first war that had lots of planes within it. I'd like you to think about the weapons we've looked at and think about which ones you think were least effective. So whether you think that Zeppelin was least effective because it was vulnerable to attack, or whether you think that first tank was least effective because you couldn't look around to check if anybody was shooting from behind you and you could only have 3 men in it. What do you think was the least effective? And I'd like you to think about why you think it was so ineffective. And I'd like you to think about which was most effective. So which gun do you think might have killed the most people? Which weapons do you think would have inflicted the most harm? Which things would have changed the war the most? Will it have been the gas? Will it have been the machine guns or the heavy artillery? Why do you think it was so effective? What is it about it that makes you think it was an effective piece of artillery, an effective piece of weaponry? Some of them here then to think about. So we've got gas, we've said about, we've got the advent of the pistol. There was also flamethrowers, and some of the information in the pack will look at flamethrowers and grenades. But we've also said about artillery, bayonets, rifles, and machine guns. And what I'd like you to do with one of your tasks today then is to sort them into a bit of a sorting tree. So within this, you're going to put the most effective, the ones that you think could kill the most people or could be best in a war, as it were, will be at the top of your table. And the ones that are least effective, maybe like the Zeppelin, maybe like that first tank, at the bottom of it. Okay. And that'll be part of your pack of work today. So your first thing you'll do is complete those words in the recall section. Your second element will be where there's some words which define different weapons, and I want you to think about which weapon goes with which word. And finally, you're going to read about this different information about weaponry, such as rifles, machine guns, gas, all these different kinds of things. And then you're going to complete the table, which sorts from bottom to top the most effective to the least effective based on your information. Do your best at that. It'll help you to understand the experience of the soldiers, because that's what it all comes down to. You think it was easier at the end of it for them to attack or defend? Do you think it made it a safer or a less safe war? I think it made it easier to defend because you couldn't attack as easy. So you've got those trenches. You're defending yourself, and even now we're saying trench as a way of showing somebody's not going to move. The machine gun, although it feels like it was about attacking because it could shoot a lot of people, actually what it meant is even if a lot of people ran at me, I could defend myself against it with this one weapon. To get past that, I needed some other way of attacking. I couldn't just run at them like people had done in the First World War, before the First World War. And the fact that nobody really moved very far in those many years of war, those 4 years of war, shows that these weapons that enable people to defend rather than attack. Okay, that's my perception anyway. And complete that work before next week, ideally before lunchtime on Thursday if you can, and then I'll have a look at it. Thanks for your attention today. See you soon, guys.